Mr. President, I rise to celebrate the life of a man and a friend who passed away this past weekend, an American icon to many Americans, in fact, not only to Americans, but to people all over the world for more than half a century, a remarkable philanthropist in his generosity, a terrific husband and father to 6 children, a daredevil, I might add, both on the screen and off the screen. In words that have added poignancy at this moment, Paul Newman once said, and I quote him, "We are such spendthrifts with our lives. The trick of living is to slip on and off the planet with the least fuss that you can muster." He went on to say, "I'm not running for sainthood. I just happen to think that in life we need to be a little more like the farmer who puts back into the soil what he takes out," end of quote. The New York Times concluded its obituary of Paul Newman with these words, but I would like them to begin my remarks, if I could, Mr. President, because I don't think that will be the last thing that people should consider when they remember Paul Newman, but the very first, Mr. President. Where the charitable work of a public figure today often seems to be motivated less by public interest than by public relations, Paul Newman was truly a rarity, an enormous celebrity whose commitment to making a difference meant far more to him than any box office, critical notice, or award nomination. And believe me, having known him over the past 25 years, I can attest to that. As a star, Mr. President, with genuine humility, he cared deeply about the people, not only of this country, but around the world, and made a significant contribution to their benefit in his own way. We're all, of course, familiar with Paul Newman's own brand, which raised nearly $250 million for charitable causes in a quarter of a century. But that was only part of the story, Mr. President. Paul Newman also founded the hole-in-the-wall gang camps for children with life-threatening diseases, one of which was located in Ashford, Connecticut, and have since opened 3 on 3 different continents around the world. Those camps serve more than 15,000 children annually, with all services provided free of charge to every single one of them. He also founded the Rowdy Ridge gang camp for families recovering from drug addiction and survivors of spousal abuse. These were no vanity causes, Mr. President, to which he simply attached his name and his face. Paul Newman was intimately involved in their operations and their success. In fact, just this afternoon, Mr. President, I spoke with a friend of mine. I serve on the advisory board of the hole-in-the-wall camp in Connecticut. But a good friend of mine is on the board of directors of that camp. He'd flown from San Francisco to be back in Connecticut today, where people in the hole-in-the-wall gang camp in Ashford, Connecticut, are gathering to remember Paul Newman. And each get up and talk about his intimate involvement with that camp and that facility. And believe me, as someone who's been involved in it on a daily basis, he worked and cared about the maintenance and operation of that facility, as he did the ones on the other 2 continents I've described. These examples remind us that every endeavor to which Paul Newman committed himself over his 83 years shared one fundamental quality. They were the product of an enduring appreciation for the special and unique place he was afforded in our society. You could not spend any time with this man without noticing that he had a remarkable life, a wife and a family that were not simply to support him, but to push and to tease him, to have that wonderful kind of vitality that we see in vibrant families. A career that afforded him opportunities and experiences many of the characters he played could not have even imagined, and Paul Newman knew it as well. But as much as he recognized the good fortune behind his success, he also profoundly understood the obligations that come with that kind of success. This was never someone who pretended to be something he was not. He did not rise from poverty or grow up in a broken home. His father, in fact, was a very successful entrepreneur in Shaker Heights, section of Cleveland, Ohio. But to watch Paul Newman's Oscar-nominated turn in that remarkable courtroom drama, The Verdict, is to witness someone whose true kinship was not with those who came from wealth or from power or privilege, but with those who struggled, who earned, who overcame. For all of his generosity, kind-heartedness, and compassion, there was another side to this man as well, one that was utterly driven to succeed, whether it was acting or directing, film or theater, charity or business. I suspect I was not the only friend of Paul Newman's who did not share his passion for racing, which he often did at our state's Lime Rock Park in Connecticut. But compared to Hollywood, Paul found racing's lack of pretension rather refreshing. The pure love he had for the sport was what made it such a thrill for him, a thrill he pursued well into his 80s, I might add. He was impossible to pigeonhole in many ways, a wonderful sense of humor and irony, a devilish spirit, which hid, just barely, a contempt for the predictable and lazy that you couldn't help but admire in the man. He once commented that the single highest honor paid him was learning that he was 19th on President Nixon's so-called enemies list, assembled by Charles Colson. He named the hole-in-the-wall gang camps after Butch Cassidy's band of outlaws and offered cowboy hats to children who had lost their hair because of chemotherapy. The first vat of Newman's own salad dressing was stirred with a canoe paddle, give you some idea of his sense of humor. And one of the biographies he wrote for a local publication read, quote, Paul Newman is probably best known for his spectacularly successful food conglomerate. In addition to giving the profits to charity, he also ran Frank Sinatra out of the spaghetti sauce business. On the downside, the spaghetti sauce is outgrossing his films, he would also point out. Let it never be said there wasn't a sparkle in those famous blue eyes of Paul's to the very end. In a career that required him to fabricate many a character and experience, Paul Newman's rebellious yet playful quality always struck me as completely genuine. It often masked and helped him promote some very serious work. A resident of Westport, Connecticut, he made enduring contributions to our state. Some will remember that he insisted, for instance, on holding the first movie premiere in New Haven, Connecticut's history. Presiding officer, well familiar with that community, when Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid made its debuts at the Roger Sherman Theater in downtown New Haven. But for the sprinkle of glitter in Paul's imaginable magnitude brought to Connecticut, the difference he made to our communities was far more lasting, of course, from helping to preserve open spaces such as Trout Brook Valley in Connecticut and renovate the Westport Historical Society and its country playhouse, to the active role he played in government at the local, state, and federal levels. Mr. President, like all Americans at this hour, I'm going to miss him. Great guy and a good friend. And as much as I've missed his friendship and his performances on the television screen or the movie theater, I'll miss being reminded every time that we saw him, just how good and decent a man he truly was. Our thoughts and prayers are obviously with Joanne, his lovely wife, their daughters, and the rest of the Newman family. And I wanted to thank him for sharing with us these many, many years. A great guy. And Mr. President, there are a couple of wonderful obituaries that were written in the New York Times and the Hartford Courant that I'm going to ask consent to include as well.